All right, so I'm going to go through a quick presentation, but we're mostly going to go through like an actual lot, and we'll code an app together. So, like Will said, this presentation is on building cross-platform apps with the Flutter framework. Just a general breakdown. I'll do a quick introduction, give you a little bit of my background, give you a technical overview of Flutter, and then that's when we'll jump into the demo. That's where we'll spend most of our time. And then we'll actually build the app on multiple platforms. We can see like some of the nuances that might come up in that. So to my background, I actually started off doing some mobile development right out of college. We started working for a company that was using these little guys. They're simple devices that they would put in shop floor or distribution centers. We would write some little applications that the employees would use on these devices. And then later on, the Nintendo DS, my daughter wanted a Nintendo DS for Christmas, got her a Nintendo DS. Hey, it would be cool to write some programs for that. So found out that you could load programs from an SD card, write some mobile code. So I wrote a couple of cheesy little games. Then never got an iPhone, but when the iPad came out, really got interested in mobile applications, and I started sort of pitching this at work. And a couple of guys that I worked with were talking about, hey, it would be really cool if we could use an iPad to do like all these various different things. So finally convinced our boss to start taking us seriously and start building some mobile applications. And we actually had our first mobile team at the company that I was working for. Then they decided that you guys really should learn how to write code. So they sent us to Big Nerd Ranch. If anybody's heard of it, it's a little plug there for those guys. It was a really awesome boot camp style thing to learn iOS development. So after that, we started off building iOS apps. Soon after that, Android apps, and then more recently, started running into issues with building applications for iOS, then turning around having to build the same application for Android, and having to deal with all the nuances there. So when React Native came out, it was a really cool solution to that problem of having to have multiple code bases. So started writing some React Native code. Then Flutter came out as a competitor. Started looking into that. So I am by no means a Flutter expert, but that's sort of my path to development and finally picking up Flutter. And I've written a couple of little side projects in Flutter. So what is Flutter? It's a write once, deploy to any platform framework. Originally it was targeting for iOS, that Android iOS, to those two platforms, and having to build out of two separate code bases to try to solidify that into a single code base that could deploy to either platform. They recently, I think about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, they expanded that to do web and desktop. So desktop Linux, desktop Mac, desktop Windows. So you can write code in Flutter one time and deploy to any of those platforms or frameworks. So yeah, it was introduced by Google in 2017. And then I guess one other call out is it uses a widget hierarchy, which is a little bit different. We'll see that more when we actually get into the coding. So why should we take Flutter seriously? This graph sort of shows, it's a little difficult to read, but it shows the popularity of all the various similar frameworks that are in the market today. And you'll notice that Flutter has drastically increased in the past 3 years, and it's actually caught and surpassed React Native. You'll also notice a lot of the other smaller players like Cordova, Ionic, Xamarin, Unity, they've all lost a significant amount of popularity. So some alternatives, Cordova used to be called PhoneGap back in the day. We used this a lot back when we were writing a bunch of iPad apps, especially for like shop floor stuff. We're mostly web developers, so we used PhoneGap quite a bit. The negative to it is it's a web wrapper, right? And then Ionic, very similar native script, and then Xamarin is sort of Microsoft's take on building things in C#. So really the biggest like competitor is React Native. And for React Native, it has a lot of pros. Components map to native iOS and Android. You get near native performance. There's a large community. It's easy to learn if you already know React, especially if you already know React. Some of the cons, it is a mobile framework. You can't really build for web or other platforms without using other like third-party tools. So there are some, I think there's React Native Web now, so you can actually build web with React Native, but it's a little, you have to, there's a little bit more to it than just writing a Flutter app and saying build a website. It has slower hot reloads, and it tends to result in more lines of code. In contrast, Flutter draws widgets natively on a canvas. You still get that near native performance, and it has baked-in support for more than just mobile frameworks. They really they have a Cupertino library, and then they also have a material library. They really kind of push for like that Google look and feel. It's a Google framework, so no surprises there. It does have a little bit of a learning curve because it's built in a language called Dart. And that Dart community is a little bit smaller. So I always like to have this disclaimer: shouldn't always use Flutter. Flutter is it's a tool, right? So like any tool, a screwdriver is great for screwing and unscrewing screws. It's not so great if you need a hammer and nail. So just take that into account. There are some reasons why you shouldn't use Flutter. Some would be like maintenance cost isn't a factor. You don't care that it's in one code base. You're happy to use multiple code bases. You might have already had 2 code bases, and there'd be a significant lift to switch to something else. If you have a dev team that's already specialized in those different frameworks, it might be difficult for them to learn a new framework. If you only plan on supporting one framework long term, so if you're only going to build an iOS app and you're never going to build an Android app, you're never going to build a web app, then there's no reason to use Flutter. Like you could just learn iOS and build an iOS app. If you want to stay cutting edge, each framework, Xcode and Swift will release new features and things over time. Android and Kotlin will release new things over time. If you want to take advantage of those new features right away and you don't want to wait for them to be supported in Flutter, that could be a reason not to use it. And then there is a performance concern. So there, as with any framework, there's going to be a little bit of a slower performance than just writing it natively. So with that, let's go ahead and switch over to the demo. So probably the easiest way to get started with Flutter, they actually have a very nice little online coding IDE similar to like a JS Fiddle or Code Sandbox called Dartpad. So you can go to Dartpad, you can write some Dart code, and then you can run it in the browser without having to download anything, install anything. And this is a good way to just get started and try stuff out. They also have a bunch of templates, and they have now added Flutter support to Dartpad, so you can actually run full-blown Flutter apps in the web in real time. So we'll pick one of these. This is the default app that gets started when you start a new Flutter app, a new Flutter project. So that's one of the samples here, and I can just click run, and it will actually spin up that app in the browser, and I can test it out. I can make changes to it, edit it here in the browser, and then run it again. So very easy way to get started without any lift at all, really. One of the other cool things about Dartpad is it has gist integration, so you can actually throw a gist out there, or if you find a gist that somebody else has already written that you want to test or play around with, you can grab that gist. You really just need the ID of it, And you can literally go over to Dartpad and just paste that in, and it will now run my gist. So for this gist, we'll take a look at some of the features in Dart. This is a demonstration of streams. Dart has really good stream support. So you'll see we've got a stream controller, got a little object here, an event object. That stream controller is a broadcast stream. So I can have multiple subscribers that are listening, and they're just printing out the data from this event object that's being published. There's also something called a generator function. You might be familiar with this in JavaScript as well, but you can asynchronously stream from a generator function. So if we scroll down here, you can see these event listeners. I'm creating an event listener that will basically just print off we'll just print off the events from the stream as it gets them. And then I'm just attaching this event listener function to my stream controller. And then you can also do it in line. Just an example of doing it in line. And pretty much you saw it already run through it. It kind of ran through it pretty quickly, but it basically is just printing those events off as they go across that stream. So if you ever want to write some Dart code or test something out, you can throw a gist out there, or you can just go to Dartpad and key in some code. Yeah, they also link to your GitHub account. So like if you're okay linking your GitHub account to Dartpad, then you can write code here and save it into GitHub. All right, so let's switch over to Flutter now. So I'm going to switch over to Android Studio. There are plugins for Android Studio for Flutter that you can download that work really well. There are also VS Code. I am not as familiar with the VS Code plugins, but they do exist. So if somebody wants to go check that out, if you're really passionate about using VS Code, feel free to try those plugins out. I prefer the ones in Android Studio. Sorry, so I can start a new Flutter project, and I'll just say next. We're gonna actually create an image search app that will search images against an API called Pexels. And then we'll just give this a package name of com.image search. You can pick the language if you prefer to use Java and Objective-C. Kotlin or Swift are the defaults. And then you can select which platforms you want to target. Yeah, go ahead.
Quick question about the language selection. So if you choose a different language, do you have access to the underlying language if you need to, or is that kind of the reason why you would choose one or the other?
Yeah, good question. So what this is going to do is it's going to spin up two projects, an iOS project and an Android project in your code base. And then if I pick web and Mac OS, it's gonna spin up multiple projects to run in each one of those frameworks. So you can still write Objective-C, and Objective-C can live side by side with Swift. This is really like what you want that template to be generated in. So if you want it to be generated in Swift, you can generate in Swift. You can still use Objective-C or Swift after the fact. This isn't going to like lock you into one or the other, if that's what the question was.
Yeah, I was just curious. Yeah, cool, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and check web here. That one's unchecked by default, but we'll say we want to build in these three environments. I don't have Windows or Linux set up. And I'm running on a Mac, so I'm just going to pick these four.
If you check web, the actual like code that gets generated, is it Angular Dart, or is it like some kind of JavaScript shim?
So there's no Angular in this at all. But it's Flutter code. That Flutter code gets converted into JavaScript and run on the web.
So it gets converted into
It's
JavaScript instead
transposed,
of being
yeah.
a shim. Okay.
Yeah, so it's not going to generate like the code for me and the web code for me in any framework or anything like that. It's gonna take my code and run it, convert it live to the HTML and JavaScript. Okay, so we started a new project. It spins up this little counter project. We're gonna go ahead and pick my iOS simulator, and then we're gonna go ahead and just run this. We'll see what it looks like just out of the box, starting a brand new Flutter project. This could take a little bit, so if anybody else has any other questions, feel free.
I have one question. On the last slide that you had, you were talking about the reasons why you might want to choose like developing a native language as opposed to using Flutter. I was wondering, are there any reasons that you can think of why you might want to choose one of the other frameworks, like for example, React Native, as opposed to Flutter, besides just having like React experience or familiarity with it?
Yeah, they're pretty similar. I can't think of anything right offhand why you would have. There are some differences, like the way that it merges and runs native code is a little bit different than Flutter versus React Native. But at the end of the day, like they have the same capabilities. You're not really gonna. I don't think you would miss anything.
The only thing that I thought maybe like the UI, like for example, like that looks like Material UI. How much control do you have over that?
Significant amount. Like you can go in and change. So they actually have a Cupertino library as well. So if you want it to look iOS, like you can make it look iOS. So yeah, the default, obviously it's a Google framework, so the default is obviously going to be Material.
Because that's the best option.
Yeah. They have to say that anyway.
The best option TM.
Okay, so now that we get this running in our iOS simulator, we can take a look through some of the code. Like I mentioned before, it's really a widget hierarchy. So our app is a stateless widget itself. And then in that stateless widget, you can do things like set a theme. So you'll notice that like by default, it's got this blue swatch theme. If we don't like that blue color, like we can change this, and it will hot reload. So we'll see it changes as soon as I save. Let me see if I can. Size this.
What kind of support does Flutter have for like some of the like things that are available in the browser, like local storage or maybe like web workers, service workers?
Yeah, I'm actually gonna show that later. So not necessarily service workers, but local storage. They have a package manager called Pub that's very similar to NPM. So there are tons of packages out there that'll do a lot of that stuff for you. So you don't have to basically reinvent the wheel. So yeah, there are packages that'll do most things. You can pull them in. Local storage is one that we'll actually do in this project. Yeah, the key, I guess one thing to call out there is because it has to support multiple platforms. We'll actually see this when we search in Pub. The people who build these packages don't necessarily have to support every platform. So that is one little catch where you might find a package out there that only supports iOS and Android, or only iOS for that matter. So you have to be a little cautious about what you're building and whether you're using the right packages. Okay, so we change that. We can see that it hot reloads. We're actually going to change.
NashJS yellow, I love it.
Yeah, let's go ahead and change like the whole. I really don't like the light theme and the color that's provided. So let's just go ahead and change this whole theme entirely. So what we can do is we can create a new theme data, and they have helper functions here. So I like dark themes, so I'm going to go with dark. I'm not just going to use the boilerplate one though. So they have something similar to like a clone function where I can say copy with, and in the copy with I can actually pass in anything that I want to change that I want to be different from just the default dark theme. So I'm going to actually change that primary swatch color, and we're going to use colors.blue-gray. So now let's save that, and that looks a little bit better. And then if I click my button, you'll see it's updating this text on the screen. If we scroll down, this is actually using a stateful widget. So in that stateful widget, this number that's actually displaying is in our state. So in our homepage state, we have this counter variable. And then there's a function called increment counter. Increment counter is just setting our state to increment the counter by 1 every time we click it. And if we scroll down and take a look at the widget hierarchy for displaying this app, there's a scaffold object. That scaffold object can have things like an app bar, a body, and a floating action button. And so this is actually taking advantage of all those. We got the app bar at the top. We have a body with a center and it has these 2 text elements in it. And one of those is displaying that counter. So I guess one call out here is variables can be inline, and then you'll notice it's just referenced with this $sign. This $sign allows you to interop variables into your text strings. So if I wanted to type something else here, do that, and it'll just be part of that text.
Hey, quick question, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Kind of go back to the top of defining your theme. Just a quick syntax question. I'm just curious. When you had like primary color and then colon colors blue-gray, is that like when you're calling that copy with function, is like name parameters kind of like, how does it know? Like I'm assuming that copy with could take multiple arguments. How does it know which parameter?
So that's a feature of Dart where you can have name parameters.
Okay.
So yeah, it's very similar to if you've written any Objective-C has name parameters as well. So
Okay, cool.
Yeah, good question. So yeah, and I think the IDE will help me with this.
Jonathan. There's a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I saw you had state there. Is it like React where there's a bunch of different state options like Redux, et cetera, or do they just have the simple state?
So this is just the built-in state, similar to like use state in React. I haven't really checked to see if there are like other state options out, like third-party state options that exist. There probably are, but I haven't used any of them. Okay, so back to our app, and then that last part is just the floating action button. That floating action button is what's displaying our little plus sign here. You can see they're using an icon of add. We can change this and use a different icon if we wanted to. And there's tons of stuff out there. So yeah, that's so now we've got our theme updated. I mentioned the pub package manager before, so let's switch over and take a look at what's available out there. Oh, and I guess I should have also mentioned that Dart and Flutter are both very well documented. You can go to dart.dev and take a look at all the documentation about Dart. There's also flutter.dev, tons of documentation out there for Flutter. And then pub.dev is where their package manager is, and you can search for packages. So I think somebody mentioned local storage. You wanted to search and see if there are any local storage packages, then you just search for that, find it, and add it to your project. And this is where you can see what I've mentioned before about which platforms are supported. They'll be listed in pub, so you can see what's supported, what's not supported, and you can filter on it.
That's cool.
So let's see, where am I at?
I want to jump ahead, but when you use pub, does it create like a manifest similar to package JSON or something like that?
Yeah, it's almost exactly the same as a package JSON. So if you're familiar with JavaScript and Node and package JSON, it builds a pub spec YAML, and that pub spec YAML will be in our project. So I can pull that up real quick. So yeah, when it generated our project, it created that for us automatically. So there's our pub spec YAML file, and it's got our list of dependencies. And then, yeah, same thing, like you have dev dependencies, very similar to NPM.
I don't know if you plan on talking about this later, but how difficult is it to write your own plugin? So for example, if you wanted to support something that isn't supported yet, what's involved in like writing a plugin? What do you have to do?
It's essentially the same as NPM. So if you're familiar with writing an NPM package, same concept.
How does it work, given that you'd have to support it for like different devices, maybe like support it differently?
You don't have to. So that's the thing. Like you have to tell us which platforms you do support. You mentioned devices. That's a little bit even more complicated. I mean, it's the same as like React Native. Like you're sort of at the mercy of the people who are building those third parties, that they're gonna build it so that it works well on multiple devices. And I hope that they're
There's some
testing.
kind of build time or runtime variables as well, so you can check the environment that you're in, so you can do switching on behavior depending on the environment that's running on.
Yeah, they're environments. Sorry, what was can you?
So like if Daniel built a package that supported iOS and Android, but the shim that he's building is differently. Or
Yeah, you can tell which platform you're running on. Yeah, for sure. Cool. Yeah, for some reason I was thinking when you said environment, I immediately
Like
started
production or
prod,
not.
non-prod.
Yeah.
Okay, so where are we now? So let's take a look. We want to, like I mentioned, we want to do an image search. So we're gonna hit this Pexels API. So there's actually this a site out there called pexels.com. You can go sign up for a free account, and it's just a place to upload and share photos. So people can go in here and share free photos, and they're free to use for anything that you want to use them for. So it's just basically a giant database of photos. I've already got an API key, but you can go here and sign up, get an API key, and then I'm going to use Postman to just hit their API, just to kind of show what kind of data comes back. We'll go ahead and run that, and we'll see that we've got a paginated list of data that comes back as JSON, and then a photos array that has a list of all of our photos that match our search query criteria. So pretty simple and straightforward. It's pretty well documented API if you want to look at it. They have other APIs as well, so if you're interested in using any of the others, feel free. But this is the only one that we're gonna need for our demonstration. So one call out there is when I signed up for Pexels, I get an API key that I have to use. So I'm gonna have to manage that API key, and in order to do that, normally we would build like a backend service, authenticate our users, all that. Shout out to Will. But for this demonstration, I don't have time to build a backend. So I'm just gonna use that API key, and I'm gonna use a library called .env. .env is just a way to have environmental variables. You would normally use them on a backend system to pull in your environment variables when an application is deployed to a server. In this specific case, like it gives us the ability to have our public, our code public, and you can go get your API key and drop it in your project and run it. So let's head back over to PubDev and look for .env. And we're going to use this one. So flutter.env. Everything in PubDev has all these categories, like installing. It's got install instructions, very similar to npm. I can come here and I can just copy and paste this out. So if I want to add flutter.env to my project, I can just paste that. I can switch over to a terminal and just paste that code in. It will update my pubspec YAML, just like an npm install. And you'll see there is flutter.env 502. All right, so now that we have .env installed, this also talks about how to import it, but we don't need that. We're going to switch over to the example, or sorry, to the README, and we're going to scroll down here. We're just going to grab this demo, and we're going to create a .env file in our project, and I'm just going to paste that data exactly as it is and save that. And then we're going to switch over to main, and a couple of other things that we do need to do for .env. It needs to load those environment variables before our app starts to run. So they have some documentation on here. If you're running Flutter 5.0 or higher, you can just use this code. And if you're using 5.0 or later, there's a little bit it's a little bit different in how you have to initialize it. But for our app, we are definitely 5.0 or higher. So I'm just going to copy this line, not the whole thing, and then I'm going to switch over to our project. I go up and find my main app. You'll notice right now it is just void. It's not asynchronous. It needs to be asynchronous so that I can await. So I'm going to change this to be a future. A future is basically a promise if you're used to JavaScript and asynchronous code. And then I'm going to add my await on .env.load. It's going to tell me that I don't have it imported, and then I can just click that and it will auto import for me. So now I should have that file loaded, and I can now use those environment variables that we set up. Right now it's just the default, but to make sure that it is working, let's go ahead and print that to the screen. So in our text here, I'm just going to change this existing one. So I'm going to create. Actually, let's update it with when our increment counter gets set. So let's call this foobar. I should also have mentioned that there is no private keyword, private or public keyword. You'll see these underscores and probably asking like, what is that? What is an underscore? Underscore in Dart means it's a private variable. So
it's more convention versus
yeah, exactly. So yeah, let's just call this foobar and make it empty string for now. And then we will change this text to be foobar. Oh, and then in our increment counter, we're just going to load. I'm sorry, we want to set state. No. We also don't want to do asynchronous code inside of a set state. So we're gonna, actually this may not be async at this point. I think our async code is already over. And it can be null, so that's. So in here, we'll just say if, so I'm just leave that alone, say if bar is not null, let's set state. Set. This is supposed to be unset here. All right, so now if I switch over to my simulator, I should be able to click this and see foobar. And I just realized that you cannot load files. So it's a safety feature of Flutter. You can't load files without declaring them in your pubspec YAML. So because we added that .env file, I need to actually add it as an asset in my pubspec YAML. And there is some commented out example code here. And that is in the documentation, if I read through the documentation. All right, so save that.
So the idea behind that, like you just couldn't like extract somebody's like contact file or something.
Yeah, I think I have to rerun this now because of that update. So it'll take a second. And then there we go. All right, so now we've got our environment file is loading our environment file. And I'm going to switch over to here and I'm going to now change my environment file to my key that I created before. So now let's get rid of all of this. We don't need this anymore. And we can actually get rid of that. All right, so now we want to make our API call. So let's build our backend service to fetch our data from Pexels. So I'm going to actually create a new directory so we can keep our code split up better. We want to model because I want to model the data. I want to have a model for my data that I pull back from Pexels. So I'm just going to create a models directory. Then go ahead and create a services directory as well. And we know we're going to need a service to get our data, to go fetch our data, and come back. So let's start with a model. Another cool feature of Android Studio in general is code templating. So you can build live templates, and I can use those templates pretty quickly. A lot of default templates are created for you automatically, like those stateful widgets, stateless widgets. Those are all built in by the plugin. So I can spin up those very quickly. I've actually gone ahead and created a couple here. So I'm going to create a new Dart file. I'm going to call it image results. And then I'm just going to type MDL. And you'll notice MDL comes up as an autocomplete here. What that's really doing is it's using these live code templates that you can set up and create in preferences. So you can go to preferences, editor, and then live templates. and you can actually go in here and create your own. Like I mentioned, Flutter, the Flutter and Dart plugins already have some that they provide for you automatically. And then you can create your own. So you can take a look at this one that I've created. It's essentially a model template to just help create some of that boilerplate code automatically. I don't have to remember to do some of the basics. So back over here, I'm going to say MDL. There's my live template. I click enter. Now there are some things I have to fill out. So in my model, I want to create an image results. And then that's the only thing I need to add. Let's switch back over to our Pexels API here and see what we have in our data. So in each one of our photos, we have an ID, so that's good. And then we have a photographer. We have some source data, the original image that was uploaded, and then some compressed versions of that image and reformatted versions of that image. And then an alt, which is a little description about what this image is. So let's go back over to our model and add those in. So we know we wanted the photographer. A description. We're gonna call this a preview URL and a full URL, full size. And then in our constructor, we just want to populate that data from our constructor. So when you create a new image result, you can just pass those name parameters in, and they'll populate automatically. I just realized I forgot. And then we want to be able to parse JSON. We're going to get JSON back. We want to take that JSON and turn it into our object. So we're going to write this factory function to take our JSON map of strings and dynamic content, and then turn it into our image result. So once again, looking back over here at that JSON data, we know that we have that photographer, we have alt as our description. We want original to be the original size image. And then we're just going to use medium. I think that'll be small enough as our preview URL. So come back over here and populate that. It's source, correct? Yep. Let's do an inline null check. And then I said medium, right?
Is that JSON that does support like dot pathing? Or you like source dot medium?
That's a good question. Maybe.
Okay. Just curious.
Not 100% sure. Did mention I was not a Flutter expert, right?
No, you're doing great. Appreciate the sharing.
Okay.
Declare properties as nullable, or does that matter?
Yeah, if I wanted them to be nullable, in this specific case, like I want them to all be required.
But it'll
Yeah, I guess you could still pass null.
use the null safe on 21 and 22.
Oh yeah, I see your point. Yeah, good question. So what you're saying is like this could be null.
Does required mean the key or the value?
Required means that a value has to be passed. Whether that value could be null, I'm not 100% sure.
It seems that way.
Okay, so we got our model built. Let's go ahead and switch over and build our service. And then we're going to call this image result service. And once again, we're going to use a template that I created before, and we'll take a look at this one. You'll notice it includes HTTP, which is a nice little library to go fetch data across the internet via HTTP endpoints, specifically REST in this case, and then a local storage library to handle our local storage. So that'll handle, if it's web, it'll use web-based local storage. If it's iOS or it's Android, it'll use whichever local storage makes sense for that framework, for that platform. So we're going to call this image result service. And then my environment variable is going to be that. Our local storage key, to specify that. I'm just going to type something. And then our JSON cache was photos, going back to our data that comes back. Our array is inside of photos. So we want to go ahead and navigate down into our photos, and that's what we're going to iterate over. And then let's see what else. Our search URL will also need to grab that from over here. So grab that from our test code, paste that in. Obviously, we don't want to pass in just birds statically, so we're going to change that.
It's the bird.app.
We've already got a text that's being passed in to get all, so we'll just pass text. You could also do pagination here. You could do an infinite scroll. We're not going to have time to do that, obviously, so I'm just going to change this to 30 for now.
Are strings like automatically templated in Dart? Or are you passing in like a template string?
What do you mean?
It looks
Oh.
like that's checking.
Yeah,
for-
it's passed. It was passed here. Is that what you're
Let's
asking?
talk about interpolation, like on line 19, the $sign text, it's automatically, you don't have to use backticks like you would with like a.
That's right. Yeah, you can just do it.
That's just like native, like
It's
in
native
Dart.
built in.
Okay.
Now, one thing that's a little tricky and a little confusing is if it's a property of that object, you do have to do something a little different. You have to put squiggly brackets. I'm guessing because it can't figure out the dot, whether it's a period or not. I think you can always use squiggly brackets. It'll always work, but okay, I think that was everything. And then I just need to go in and oh, I guess I should show that we need to add our dependencies. So I'm just going to run this Flutter pub add HTTP, and then Flutter pub add local storage. And then we need to import our image result model.
I think you named it image results in the last one, instead of image results together. In your model, it was pluralized.
Oh, here.
No,
No.
in your model, your class name was results plural.
Oh, was it? Oh, I screwed that up. Good catch. I meant to make that image result. So now hopefully it'll show up. There we go. Okay, So now we should be getting some data back. Let's switch over to our main Dart file. We've got our floating action button still there. So let's rather than updating our counter and state, let's go ahead and get rid of our counter. We don't need that. And inside of our increment counter, let's go ahead and make our, we need to add a couple of local variables. So first we need our image result service. This needs to be private. You used to have to say new. You don't have to say new anymore. You can just do this. A list of image results.
Does Flutter have like a dependency injection?
I don't think it has one built in, but there are several packages out there that will do that.
I noticed you give that class name, like that underscore prefix. Is that like a convention indicates? It's not like an exported class, it's just internal to this file.
Correct, it's gonna be private. Yep. So import that. And then inside increment counter, we're just gonna call image result service dot get all. And then for now, we're just gonna hard code in back to birds. We love birds. Yeah. Then, yeah, also we need to make this asynchronous. Oh, and it can and then we're just going to print this for now. So let's save that, switch back over to our app. And I think I'm going to have to restart since I added new packages. Copy that over. Let me start this one more time. There we go. Okay, so now we can see we've got our array of all of our images that came back from our service call. So now, now let's make it pretty, and hopefully we can get through this pretty quickly. So we want to create a new component. So let's go ahead and create a new components directory. And we're just going to call this image scroll. Yes, I was going to create this. What was I going to call this? Image results scroll container. And once again, we're going to create we're gonna use our template and create a scrollable view of images. And then I just need to fill this out. So scroll container. And then what property do we want to use from image result? We want to use the preview URL. Let's just make sure that
So the way that the widget system works, it's kind of like React, where you can pass properties into the component, but you also have children that are rendered kind of within the component itself, and that's how that tree structure is set there on line 14.
correct, yeah. And we'll see that here in a second in main when we use this new scrollable container.
And what's the difference between child and children? Is it children is plural and child is singular? Or?
That's exactly right. And different widgets have some have just a child, some have just children. It really seems to be kind of up to whoever wrote that widget.
So
I
it's
guess
not
how
like
it's
standard, it's like different between.
Yeah, from what I've seen, yeah, I don't think there is. There may be some logic to it that I'm not aware of, but. So anyway, we're gonna grab those images and display them on the screen. Now we need to switch back over to our main. And we're just gonna get rid of this text now. We don't need this anymore. And we're gonna replace that with our image scroll. Sorry, image result scroll container. And we need to give it results. So make that image results. And I think. Oh, I also want to change this main axis alignment. So we're going to change that to space between. For in the future, we're going to add something else here. And then rather than print this now, let's set state. And we'll set our image results to. Oh, and also should check to see because this is null. Image results. It's not null. All right, so we'll save that. And let's see. Okay, so now we've got our image results scroll container, passing in our image results. So when we click this button, we get a bunch of birds. So this doesn't look great, obviously, and probably don't want an app that just searches for birds all the time. So let's
Speak for yourself.
let's go ahead and change that while we're at it. So we're gonna add a text field here, and in this text field, I'm gonna go ahead and add some decoration to it. Input decoration. I'm gonna add a border. This one, and we're gonna add a hint text. And I'm just gonna type in enter search. Search for birds. Search for birds. Yeah, I could just put birds. I guess, since that's what we're gonna type. All right, so now we've got our text field, and I guess let's see. Oh yeah, obviously we need an Onchange so we can change our text. Yeah, we're just gonna pass that in. So let's add an Onchange function. Onchange function is gonna get a text string, and then we're just going to call. Right now, we're just gonna call increment counter. Actually, I'll tell you what. Let's just do this. And then we'll go ahead and change this to past text. Oh, you know what? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm gonna put this on the text field, and this is Onchange. Oh, I guess that was there before. We don't need this floating action button. I should have just taken that out. That's fine. Stuff.
I think it's changed portal.
Yeah,
Or,
right,
past
Oh,
tense,
that- yeah, there we go. Okay, so now we've got our text field here. I can now type in, so I guess I'll do a cat. There we go. So we get cats. So that's nice. The bad thing is it's firing that off every time this changes, right? So every single time I type, it's not debouncing, which is not great. It's hitting our API pretty quickly, pretty often. We are caching the results, which is good, but it's still doing a lot of unnecessary searches. So let's go ahead and fix that. But I just realized that now that I'm gonna have to fix that, I've already started writing this inline. I really wish I hadn't done that. So one of the nice things that you can do here is in the refactor menu, you can come in and say, extract this to a Flutter widget. In this case, it's not happy because I'm using this increment counter. So I'm just going to comment that out for now. Actually, let me just comment out the whole Onchange for now. And then refactor, extract Flutter widget. We're going to call this search bar. So notice it created search bar, and now my search bar component is a stateless widget right here at the bottom of my file. And I'm going to take that. I don't want that to be in this file, obviously, so I'm going to take that out, and I'm going to create a new component called search bar. I'll paste my code there. I just realized in order to do this, I'm going to need a timer. So a stateless widget really isn't going to work for me. I'm going to need to just have some state. So let me comment that out. We'll go back to our live templates. I want it to be stateful, so I'm going to create a stateful widget. I'm going to call that search bar. And then now really all I need is this piece right here. So I can get rid of all this and just change my build function. Need to import text field. And now we need to work on our Onchange function. So in our Onchange function, we want to be able to take a function in from our parent. So we're going to create just create a local function variable. And then in here we'll add that as a parameter to our constructor. So now I can pass in a function from the parent that I can then call here. And then I also need to create a timer. I think I can just leave that. Just create an empty timer. Now, okay, so now in our timer code, we'll update our Onchange function. So we basically we want to cancel our timer. So if we're already searching and it hasn't run yet, we want to cancel it. We don't want to search. We don't need to. And then create a new timer. Duration, we're going to use 700 milliseconds. And then we're going to call the function that we passed in. And that's next. And this is complaining because it can be constant. So, okay. All right, so now we have a search bar that debounces, and it's not going to call her, it's not going to hammer our API. So we'll save that, switch back over to main. So now that we pull that out to a separate file, we need to import that in. Oh, and I need to pass in an Onchange. Yeah, we don't want to call this increment counter anymore either. We want to change this to be a search birds.
Search birds.
All right, so it should hot reload, and now I can search for cat, and there we go. This still doesn't look great, right? Because these images are all different sizes. So let's head back over to Flutter for one last little thing. One of the other cool things that they have in here in their docs, they have something called cookbooks. You can take a look through this and look at some of the cool things that they've built as demonstrations and examples. The one that we're going to use is a parallax effect. So we want to use the scrolling parallax effect. That'll make our images look good when we're scrolling through them. You can scroll down, you can take a look. There's that video demo. Here's all the code for it. They even have a dark pad at the bottom. So you can actually run this. You can make changes to it if you want to, and you can run it and see it in real time in a dark pad. And for some reason, there we go. So if you look through the code, we don't have time to dig into this, but it's essentially taking every image, and as you're scrolling, it's shifting that image almost like you're looking through a window in the opposite direction. So we're going to take this code just as it is. You'll notice this is a full-blown app. I don't really need all this app code. So I'm gonna scroll down here and I'm gonna grab everything from here down. Don't need their locations. I'm going to use locations. This touchpad is being a little finicky right now for some reason. Yeah, so we're going to copy that. I'll switch back over to our code. We're going to add a new component. We're going to call this image. Let's see, what do we call this? Image display item. And then I'm just going to paste that. I'm going to go to the top. We don't need this location list item. all these, or sorry, we don't need all these properties like an image URL, a name, and a country, because we already have a model. So we're just going to change this to be our model, our image result model. And import in. We need to import in our image result. All right, so now we have access to our image result and our locate. Oh, I just realized this is still called location list item. I want this to be image display item. Oh. Okay. All right, so now need to fix a few things real fast. So our URL is going to be our image result dot preview URL. Just need to import colors. You know what? We don't need this. And then our image result dot photographer. We're going to change this one to image result description. And we still need to import some more stuff. And we're good. Okay, so now let's switch back over to our image container, our image results container. Right now we're just displaying the images that we get back using those preview URLs. We're going to actually change this to be, sorry. So we're going to change this to be our image display item. And that's just result. All right, so we'll save that, and then we should see that automatic reload. We're going to go back to Bird. And then we can scroll through our list of birds, and you can sort of see that effect occurring. So you'll see the parallax effect where the bird image is shifting as I scroll. So I guess one last thing. Let's use that full URL since we have it, and we'll add a gesture detector on this this padding element in our display item, and we'll open it in a web view. So in order to do that, I need to import another package called URL launcher. So let's switch back over. I can go over to pub, and I can search for URL launcher. And then I can just grab this. URL launcher, and then while that's running, I'm going to add another nice little thing about this the plugin for Android Studio is you can wrap these widgets very easily. So I can click this little light bulb, and I can say wrap this in another widget, want to wrap this in a gesture detector because I want to add a click. I want to make this clickable. So on tap, and then on top of this image, we want to open the full image in a web view. Oops. So we're going to say launch URL. This needs a URI, so we're going to parse that full URL we have. We'll save that. I'm gonna have to rerun this inside package. I'm gonna search for bird again. It's gonna pull from our cache, and then we may not have fully restarted it. Try this again. Oh, sorry. That's there. What am I missing? I'm not sure what I'm missing here. Anyway, I don't want to get too hung up on that. One other thing that I wanted to get to was building this for multiple platforms. Let's go ahead and jump over to that. So far, we've just been building this in an iOS simulator. We've also got an Android simulator. I can just pick Android from this dropdown and build it and run it on Android. I can pick Chrome if I want to build it for web. Go ahead and do that.
You know, when you build your desktop, is it just like the web app running in Electron, or is it something more sophisticated than that?
I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't think it's using Electron. I'm not sure what it is using. Yeah, I haven't really dug into that. I have to look it up. Yeah, I just know at the end of the day you get like a native application. Not really sure how. All right, so here's our web view, or sorry, our website, and so we can. And the click is working on that for some reason. And then you can see select there are parallax effects. And now let's go ahead and build for desktop. Oh, I'm jumping way ahead. So in order to build for Mac, you do have to make a couple of changes. You have to add, because we're making a network call. Apple is very restrictive with security. You have to actually request permission to make that network call. So we do have to go in and make a quick update to the that Mac OS code. I probably should have gone over this too. But you'll notice like it's got these directories for like Android. This is our Android project, like we talked about before. There's an iOS project, there's a web project, there's a Mac OS project. We're going to go into Mac OS and we're going to add a key to ask for that permission. So I need to go into Mac OS runner debug profiles entitlements. We'll just need to add a new key here. And that's com Apple security network font. Save that. And now let's try this again.
XML configuration in 2022.
All right, so this will eventually build, and I'll show it when it shows up, but that's really the end of the presentation. I do have another project where that I built using their example to run native code, because you might find a need to run and bridge and run native code, use native APIs on a device. There's a pretty cool example project out there they have, and then I can share that as well. And you're welcome to look at that after this if you want to. So search for bird, and there's our native macOS app with our parallax spikes.
You search for alligators.
Because it worked for Allie.
I don't believe it's only birds, not just birds. I was gonna say.
It's a test.
It's beautiful.
And I even spelled it. Oh, I also got back crocodiles. No, I searched for alligators.
Okay.
Looked it up, Flutter does not use Electron.
Does not, yeah. I didn't think it did, but does it use something else?
Doesn't say, it looks
Doesn't
like
say
it's a
anything.
code file. The equivalent Electron app is 2.2 gigs versus 170 megs of Flutter.
What would you say the developer experience is like with Flutter and like this IDE versus React Native?
I think it's very similar. I think it's similar to using styled components in React Native, but I think with styled components, you usually have all your styling sort of broken out. With Flutter, you sort of see the styling in the code, which I kind of like that better personally. It's more of a personal preference, but it's a little bit more descriptive from a developer standpoint. If I want to center something, like I can just wrap it in a center widget. If I want to, decorate something, add a specific decoration, I add it to that widget, like as I'm writing that widget. Whereas in React Native, you usually see like you've got all of your code that's doing like automatic functionality, and then you've got like all your styling sort of split out in its own like separate style. I don't know. It's really probably preference.
Did you say you originally started like web developer or native web developer?
Web developer. Yeah.
I guess like piggybacking off of that, do you think like the transition from like web to React Native is a lot more natural than like going from web to Flutter? But if you came from a native mobile background, maybe Flutter is a more natural.
I would say if you're coming from just web, it's probably about the same. If you're coming from React Web, then it's probably easier to learn React Native, obviously, because you're already familiar with like a lot of the core functionality, like state management. If you're using like context, it's the same in React Native as it is in React for web, right?
Yeah. Brain blank for a second. Kind of drawing parallels to something I've done with React Native using like React Navigator library or something, like be able to switch between tabs or pushing, popping views. Does Flutter have something similar to that?
I think there is something like a React router or something. I think there is something similar as a separate package. Yeah, obviously I didn't have that as part of the demo.
Oh, yes. This is great. Thanks so much there.
Did you have a question?
Yeah. So I mean, the thing that was a little, I don't know if drawing is very weird, but it seemed odd to me. It's like instead of maybe managing like a a markup template, you're just managing this large build method.
Yeah.
Has that been a rub for you, or is that something that you kind of like?
I honestly, I kind of like it. Like, as long as you structure your code well, like, I think I see where you're headed. Like, it could get really ugly if it's like nested, like you can nest stuff like a million levels deep, right? And then it would be really ugly and hard to maintain. I think you run into that same problem in web and React Native too, though. So like, as long as you structure things well, I like it because it's more in line. I don't have to, I don't find myself scrolling around quite as much. But yeah, you definitely need to make sure that like you're structuring things well. Like, I tried to sort of show it with like that text field. Like, if I kept adding to that, like it would have gotten really ugly and really nested there, right? So you want to make sure like you can split it out. There are a lot of good tooling in there to help break that out as a separate widget very easily, but just got to be very cautious about how you write that code.
It looked like, based on at least the code that we were looking at, the way that state is handled is either it's like drilled into the components or like it's just in the component itself. Is there like an abstraction for state similar to like the context API?
I think there are other packages out there that will handle state. I'm just not familiar with them. Yeah, this would be similar to use state and a React app.
For whoever was asking about Redux on Flutter earlier, I just did a little bit of research. It looks like Redux is available as a package for Flutter stuff. So
Yeah, so you're talking more like global state. You want some sort of like,
Or just
or higher
shared
level
state.
state, shared state. Yeah.
How does Flutter handle like knowing when to re-render? Like, you have the set state method. Is that what's causing the re-render, or?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah, I suspect it's similar to React, but I'm not 100% sure.
And all those widgets would have lifecycle hooks, like you'd imagine.
Yeah, you can. I think it's sort of it's up to the widget, up to the creator of the widget, like what they expose. But yeah, like you could expose like a callback function on your widget if you wanted to.
Cool. Any other questions for Don? Well, thanks. That was awesome. Great job.
You're gonna give the same presentation at Sharp this already.
I don't know.
Is
Is there free food?